Good evening. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education. If we can begin by standing and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will move to public comment. Speakers have 2 minutes. And I have the sign-in list here. Mr. Mali.
Good evening, honorable members. Humayun Mali, 53 Chester Street. Our public school and citizens say thank you to greatest union leader, Honorable Frank McLaughlin. Thank you for all your sacrifices for years being the best representative for the teachers and our community. We always remember you. Our public school now with impeccable leadership by Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris moving forward. 100 days just listening to the community and the school staff has been a positive impact in our parent and community involvement. We, the citizen, feel strongly Honorable Cynthia Paris helping to break barriers, cultural barriers, language barrier. Therefore, make education such a positive experience by bringing our community and our school closer. We are grateful to Honorable Cynthia Paris for keeping our schools open during the worst crisis of September 13. There is a united petition by our citizens to ask Maura Haley, Massachusetts Attorney General, immediately resign for letting Columbia Gas getting away with murder and destruction. In this year of election, we support our teachers and their union. Million thanks to Chris Menier. Lawrence Public School Facility Management has done an excellent job. In this election year, please support our custodial employees. They need a raise and the best union. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Mali. Dr. Marianella Rivera.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Marianella Rivera. I reside at 2A Washington Street. A few weeks ago, school committee members received an email from constituents inquiring about the cost of acceleration academies and test prep, specifically regarding how much has been spent on ANET testing. The superintendent was asked to provide a specific line item budgets, the monthly financial reports, and the end of the year financial report. The proposed budget was not posted on the LPS website until hours before our school committee meeting, which did not give the community's elected officials or the public a sufficient amount of time to review it. The elected members of the school committee are still waiting for the requested financial reports for review. Concerns about bribery in the form of raises or inflated salaries, along with excessive spending on testing, have been some of the issues raised by our constituents. In order to ensure that our community's tax dollars are utilized in a way that best facilitates academic achievement and closes the gap, there should have been active collaboration between both the LAE and the school committee. This did not happen. Last year, the idea of joint meetings was proposed to the chair of both the LAE and the school committee in order to work as a team on improving our schools and managing the budget. The lack of communication and collaboration between the LAE and the school committee not only undermines our democracy, but it's opening up the doors for corruption. The LAE should hold their vote until elected officials have had the chance to review and audited financial reports. I also highly recommend that the school committee and the LAE conduct joint meetings every month in order to prevent any misunderstandings in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. Michelle Lahara.
Hello everyone, my name is Michelle Lahara. I live at 10 Diamond Street. I'm a former student in the Lawrence Public School System, and I was also the former student rep on the school committee from 2012 through 2013. Concerns regarding the equity between Abbott Academy and the rest of the high school has persisted since Abbott's inception. Funds have been dispersed equally but not equitably, specifically and most notably the theater department's budget. This shows a deficit in comprehension on what's fair regarding budgeting process. How can a budget be split equally amongst two programs that do not serve the same populations in numbers? With this understanding, in reviewing the budget, we see some item lines that make no sense, beginning with the $75K assigned for nursing at the Central Catholic High School. Central Catholic is a private institution that, although serves some of our kids, it also serves kids for surrounding cities. Are those surrounding cities also contributing to the pay of the nursing, or are tax dollars being pulled from our public education to go there? I urge our elected officials to represent the constituents, question everything, and work towards returning our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lahara. I just want to, I have no one else signed up for public testimony. I want to acknowledge presence of LTU President Frank McLaughlin. We appreciate him being here. I don't know if you want to come up and say a quick word. It's fine if not. We know you have elections tomorrow, but we thank you for being here. So at this time, we will end public testimony. We thank those who testified. And we will take up new business. I just want to mention as we take up the new business, which is the fiscal year 2020 proposed budget, that at this juncture, we have had on the LAE side, 2 budget subcommittee meetings, each of which ran roughly 3 hours in length, and during which we reviewed the budget on a school-by-school basis, as well as a review of the central office and all other departments and expenditure categories. From there, we then convened an LAE public hearing last week, in which we further discussed the budget, took public testimony, and then had the budget subcommittee on a straw poll vote for a favorable recommendation for passage of the budget that is before us tonight. So at this time, before we would enter any further discussion of the budget, I would welcome a motion to adopt the fiscal year 2020 proposed budget, so that we could put that on the floor and then enter discussion. Could I get a motion to adopt?
I make a motion to adopt.
We have a motion to adopt on the floor. Could I get a second?
Second.
Okay. At this time, it's on the before the board for discussion. Mayor?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is I think you did a pretty good job of explaining the process that we've gone to. We did meet 3 times on the budget. All 3 of them were public meetings, posted, and everyone knew where they were at, and we could go through that. What I enjoyed about those conversations, which is that, first of all, we got the school budget in a book format that looks like our city budget. So it was easy to see line by line, school by school, different departments, as money is being spent, how things are moved around. That's why it took 2 meetings of 3 hours each to kind of go through every line. Say, hey, why are they moving this money from here, then putting it there? The superintendent and her staff was very thoughtful and responsive. And that's the kind of really boring and less showy process of actually taking control of our schools. Like, if you can go to every one of those meetings and be there to ask every single one of those line item questions. I mean, it doesn't make headlines, and it's not it's not an easy thing to chant, but that's the work that was done. And I think it wasn't easy for everybody. I mean, I would rather have been home with my kids, as did the staff. But we had to get to a point, if you look at this book, that not only do you know what they spend this year, what they spent last year, and frankly what they spent in FY17 and 18, and what the change is, and we got a lot of good responses about it. And when there was gaps, we also got, the staff went back and supplemented that data to make sure that people knew, because it's not something that's not really accounted for in the city budget, is this idea of, well, what does the school look like? how many kids are in each grade, how many kids, what's the projected enrollment. And we got that as well. And then also how much the positions were new positions versus how much were collective bargaining agreement increases. This is the type of detail that we need to have in order to get, again, to a point where people feel trust in the system, that the money that we are putting out every day is being spent appropriately. We got to that place with the police department a while back, and we had to cut a lot of money out of it. But what we knew was if we gave that department money, it knew how to spend it, and it could help reduce crime, and it has done that. And I think that what we've seen in this process, and I know not everybody on the LAE board, and very few, if any, of the school committee members were part of that process, is that if given the money's going to the right places. But like I said to the superintendent and the staff on hand, I'm just not sure there's a stomach to raise the revenue to the desired need that folks want. And it's not because folks don't want to do that, and we don't love our children like we don't love everybody, like everybody else loves theirs. It's just our wallet share is just a lot smaller. I have some other questions about the total number needed above and beyond what was spent last year, but I wanted to lead with that. This process has been very open and thorough, and again, because it's an open meeting law, and we had 3 meetings that were all open to the public, and it's been reported in the newspaper at least twice, that I think that, you know, tonight we should definitely consider the budget to make sure that we don't miss a deadline to be before the city council, which is coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just add within that, what you and I have addressed are the process that the LAE has taken, obviously in conjunction with LPS. Prior to that point, the LPS team led by Superintendent Paris engaged in meetings with stakeholders and with every school, on an exhaustive meeting with every school in preparation for that, for the final budget, and meetings with the schools in which they went through the priorities for their individual communities. And that effort is very much appreciated by this board, what Superintendent Paris and her team have done to get the budget to this point. So at this point, I want to just turn it over to my colleagues to either make any statements they wish to make relative to this before we would vote, or if there are outstanding questions, this is the time to ask. Jess.
So I was not part of the budget committee, and I was not able to attend some of the hearings, so I just do have a couple of questions. Can somebody explain to me what the Central Catholic line item is?
Sure, we're going to have Christine come up.
Okay.
So Central Catholic pays for a nurse at their school. It's on our books, but they reimburse us for the costs.
Okay. And then, but why does that flow through our budget at all?
Because they just prefer to have someone that had worked in Lawrence Public Schools. So it was just part of the agreement because of Title I funds that our non-public schools have an allotment that goes to their school. So they chose to use those funds for a nurse, but they pay for it out of their budget and reimburse us.
Okay. And then my other question is around ELL, and I may be reading this incorrectly, but it seems like we have somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 allocated towards ELL services, and I don't know whether there's other resources being devoted to that that are not appearing in that line item, but that doesn't seem like a whole lot of money for the ELL population that
You
we
on a
have.
specific page in the book?
In the general, I'm sorry, I have to keep switching between my glasses.
If you're talking about the main ELL department at central office, that just
Yes.
funds the district-wide administrator and her assistant.
I
We,
see.
We have a title, an ELL grant that pays for paraprofessionals that actually work in the schools.
Okay, so then then in each individual school budget, there are more resources that are?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I think just some of the things that stand out, I think if people look at the budget and they see in areas where supplies may be being like there's less money going to the supplies. I talked about this in the subcommittee, and I think I'm going to bring it up to the main table, because I think sometimes people have the perception that we don't fund enough supply money for our students, and we get, and some of it is a culture that teachers are trying to create where giving the parents an opportunity to give something to the classroom. It's not a mandatory thing, but they do it as part of like a teaching and learning process. But it does look like some schools are moving a lot of money out of supplies, and I just thought it would be a good thing for folks to hear what we heard in the subcommittee about what principals do with, basically there's, because of autonomy in the autonomy system that we have, giving the schools at the school level that much autonomy, what they're doing with some of that money. I don't know if Christine or the superintendent want to answer that.
So part of the budget process was to meet with every school and every principal and every department head. And part of autonomy is to allow the principals to decide what they need in their school. They know, along with their teacher leadership teams and along with their parent associations, what the needs of that school are. So every year they'll come in and they'll decide, this year we want to do another curriculum adoption, or we want to buy more workbooks this year. So every year you'll see they'll move between lines of their budget. And actually during the year, they'll make changes to their budget. But during their budget process, they'll decide, we want to look at this enrichment partner, we'll want to look at this another textbook, and so they'll move between lines. So in some schools, it might look like their operating supplies, which is for their pencils and their markers. It might look like it's going down, but it's because they want to move it to another line to do another adoption. But again, it's a plan, it's a thought, and once they get the pricing, they might readjust. But that's the autonomy they have between their lines.
And I guess my expectation would be, and I don't know how we communicate that with the staff, that in the middle of the year, we're not going to hear from teachers in those buildings, I don't have copy paper, right? That's the expectation.
The expectation is that they'll have everything they need, but, I mean,
Okay.
you still could hear from parents, right? I mean, you could still hear from someone who says,
Yeah, I'm not talking about hearing from parents, I'm talking about hearing from staff,
Right.
that they don't have what they need in the classroom. So do you think do they communicate that with the staff as well, with the teachers? Hey, we're making these
Absolutely.
moves.
every school's teacher leadership team was absolutely part of the process.
Other questions, comments? Pat?
Yeah. Just to reiterate a little bit of what Christina said, as part of the Budget Subcommittee, I had the opportunity to attend 13 individual school meetings. And the school team came into that meeting with their goals for the school, what was established at the grassroots level. The schools themselves, with the parents, the teachers, and the administration, worked together to build that budget. They presented the budget, presented their needs, and the central office support staff worked through the budget with them, supported the principals in every step of the way, also gave them the opportunity to ask for something in a wish list, And I'm very confident that the schools came in with what they needed to have a successful 20 school year. And the budget is helping them achieve that goal. I'm confident with what happened, witnessing 13 of those schools as they presented their budgets.
Thank you, Pat. Other questions or comments? Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, we have a motion to approve the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget.
Actually, I do have two things. One is, I'm going to be abstaining on the vote today. That's not anything. I don't want to give people the wrong idea that in voting in favor. I think the superintendent put together a sound budget that does the things we have asked of her, and her team did a great job of doing that. I just don't want to. I'm trying to manage expectations. I don't want it to be on record voting for the budget and then trying to figure out how to pay for it from the other side. I have a funny role in that way. I just want to make sure I don't give wrong messages. The second thing is I wanted to know whether or not the ask that was over and above the net school spending number, is that changed? And if so, what that number is given the House budget? Because it kind of matters.
At this moment, we have not changed that number. We're operating under the current House number that we have and the needs of our school-based needs.
So you're still using the governor's number, not
Correct.
the House number?
Correct.
Even though the House number is more?
Potentially, we don't know. We have no confirmation of that yet.
Okay. All right.
Julia?
Mr. Chair, just a question, and I know we had public participation as any other meeting, and I think this question was brought up at the last meeting. Is this considered, again, a public hearing where people from the audience should be granted, or no, that was the last meeting?
That was the last meeting.
Okay, thank you.
We have public testimony at the beginning of this meeting. Other questions or comments? Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll. Yes will be a vote in favor, no will be a vote against, and abstain will be an abstention. This is a motion to adopt the proposed fiscal year 2020 budget for the Lawrence Public Schools.
Mayor Rivera.
Abstention?
Ms. Severio.
Yes.
Ms. Andrews.
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Ms. Mariano.
Yes.
Ms. Custodio Laura.
Yes.
Chair Conley.
Yes. Right, the motion is adopted. Want to thank the members of the Budget Subcommittee for their hard work. I want to thank the members of the board who attended the subcommittee meetings as well, whether they were on that committee or not. I especially want to thank Superintendent Paris and her team for an amazing amount of work. And we know that this work is not done yet because we have merely adopted this budget to now go over to the city to be included in the city budget, which still has their own process as the whole city budget to go, while at the same time we know the state will be going through their budget process, which will ultimately determine the Chapter 70 allocation. We know that that is always a battle as well to make sure that this budget hopefully ultimately ends up fully funded and gives the superintendent and her team the ability to continue their good work. So I thank everybody for all their work to date, but just point out that we're not done yet. While the city and the state still have their processes. I'll just mention, in closing, our next meeting will be our May meeting on May 8th. And then our last meeting of the year will be June 12th for the school year. And we'll just point out, on June 12th, there will be a proposal put before this board for detailing the budget process for next year, doing what has been mentioned here multiple times, taking what we've learned from this process, trying to improve it for next year, but to put that before the board for approval, and obviously we'll have a draft for the May meeting so that we can get feedback from board members on that, and hopefully improve on the process that was begun this year. But I will, just echoing Mayor Rivera's comments, point out again that in the 3 meetings up to tonight that this board had reviewing this budget, we had the opportunity to go through every individual school budget and go through this whole budget line item by line item. And that was only because of the incredible hard work of the LPS team. And we thank them for doing that. Are there any closing remarks anybody wishes to make on the board?
I also wanted to thank the leadership team for their hard work on this throughout the process, and I also wanted to give a shout out to Lynn Tran, the assistant comptroller, who really helped with this budget book.
That's awesome, yeah.
Thank you. All right, at this time we are adjourned.